It was a day like any other when Clara first stumbled upon the anomaly. She had been researching time theories for weeks, a project that had consumed her life, and then, something happened. A ripple in space-time. She saw it flicker before her eyes, too fast to catch but unmistakable. The world shifted, an imperceptible shift, but a shift nonetheless. The images on her computer screen blurred, and she blinked, confused. Was she tired? Or was this something more? Clara rose from her desk, the chair squeaking beneath her, and stepped toward the window. She looked out at the skyline of the city, the morning sunlight bouncing off the glass towers, as if everything were normal. But inside her heart raced. The sensation, the disorientation. It was real. Time, or rather her perception of it, had bent. She grabbed her notes. The scribbled calculations that seemed impossible just days ago. But the numbers now made sense. There had to be an explanation. The time anomaly was more than just a glitch. It was something she had unlocked. And now she needed to understand how. Clara paced back and forth in her study, the papers she had been reading scattered across the desk. The equations, the theories, everything was connected, yet it still didn't make sense. Time travel wasn't just a theory anymore, it was a reality, and she had crossed some invisible threshold. Her mind raced as she replayed the anomaly. It had only been a brief flicker, but the implications were enormous. The equations suggested a breach in the space-time continuum, a loop that was bending reality in ways she could never have predicted. She had triggered something that could alter everything. Her phone buzzed again, and Clara glanced down at the screen, surprised to see a message from her old mentor, Dr. Harlon. "Clara, I think you've discovered something big. Meet me at the lab. We need to talk." Her heart skipped a beat. Dr. Harlon had always been skeptical about time travel. If he was reaching out to her, it meant he knew something. Clara grabbed her coat and the files, ready to uncover the truth. Clara arrived at Dr. Harlon's lab, the door slightly ajar, a dim light casting shadows across the hallway. She knocked, then pushed the door open, her eyes scanning the room for any sign of him. Dr. Harlon was seated at his desk, a look of deep concentration on his face as he pored over a collection of old books and papers. When he saw Clara, he motioned for her to come in. "Clara, I've been waiting for you," he said, his voice a mix of excitement and caution. "We need to be careful. What you've uncovered, it's not something we can take lightly." Clara set the files on the desk, her eyes meeting his. "I know. That's why I came to you. This isn't just a theory anymore, Harlon. It's real. Time travel is happening, and I don't know how to stop it." Dr. Harlon's face grew serious as he studied Clara. "This isn't just a scientific breakthrough, Clara. If time travel is real, then it opens the door to paradoxes. Dangerous, destructive paradoxes. The kind of mistakes that could unravel reality itself." Clara's hands clenched into fists. "I didn't ask for this, Harlon. I didn't plan for any of it. I was just trying to understand the equations, and then, this happened." "You're not the first to stumble upon this," Dr. Harlon said. "Others before you have tried to play with time, but they didn't know what they were tampering with. And some of them never came back." Clara's breath caught in her throat. "What do we do now?" Harlon stood, walking to the chalkboard covered in formulas. "We find out how deep this rabbit hole goes, but we tread carefully, Clara. The future, and the past, are not something we can control." The room felt heavy with the weight of their conversation. Clara stared at the equations, her mind buzzing with possibilities. The lines between reality and science were blurring. She had unlocked something that was both terrifying and exhilarating. Dr. Harlon interrupted her thoughts. "Clara, you've done something no one else has managed, but now you need to understand what it means." Clara nodded. "I know, but I need to know more. I need to understand what's happening before it's too late." "We'll get there," Dr. Harlon said, his voice firm as he picked up a different set of papers. "But for now we work together, step by step." Clara turned toward the door, her thoughts focused. This was just the beginning, and whatever the future held, she would face it head on. The weeks passed in a blur, As Clara and Dr. Harlon delved deeper into their research, the data was staggering. Everything they'd assumed about time travel had shifted. Time, it seemed, wasn't just a linear progression. It was fluid, malleable, and full of dangerous paradoxes. Clara sat in the lab, surrounded by books and papers, the screen in front of her flashing with equations she could barely comprehend. "It's happening," she murmured to herself. "We're bending time, but we're also breaking it." Dr. Harlon entered the room, his face tense. "Clara, I've been thinking. We need to stop before we get too deep. The more we dig, the more unstable the equations become. I'm seeing discrepancies in the results. Small changes that could lead to catastrophic consequences." Clara looked up from her work, her mind racing. "We can't stop now. We've only scratched the surface. The paradoxes, they're real, Harlon. And if we stop now, we won't understand what's really happening." Harlan's voice softened. "I'm not saying we stop, I'm saying we need to be careful. One wrong move, and we could lose everything." Clara clenched her fists, determination in her eyes. "I'm not going to lose this, Harlon. We've come too far." The next day, Clara received an unexpected call. She hadn't recognized the number, but something in her gut told her to pick up. "This is Clara Williams," she said, her voice tight. The voice on the other end was calm, but there was an edge to it. "I know what you're doing, Clara, and I'm warning you, stop now before it's too late." Clara's stomach dropped. "Who is this?" The voice didn't answer. "You think you can control time? You think you can change the past and not face the consequences? There are forces at play you don't understand." The line went dead. Clara stood still, the weight of the conversation sinking in. She had no idea who had called, but the warning felt too real to ignore. She couldn't afford to be afraid now. She had to keep going. Clara and Dr. Harlon met that evening to discuss the call. Harlon was pacing back and forth, a worried expression etched on his face. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. People are noticing what we're doing. We're playing with forces we don't fully understand." Clara stood her ground. "I'm not going to back down, Harlon. We're on the verge of something incredible, and you can feel it too. We can't just stop because someone's threatening us." Harlon stopped pacing and looked at her, his face etched with concern. "This isn't a game, Clara. Time travel is a Pandora's box. Once it's open, there's no going back." Clara's voice grew firm. "I know the risks, but I'm willing to face them. We're so close, Harlon. We can change everything." Harlon sighed. "You're right. But we need to proceed carefully. We're already walking a tightrope. One misstep, and everything we've worked for could unravel." The next few days were filled with increasing pressure. Clara couldn't stop thinking about the call, the warning, and the consequences of what they were doing. The more they tested the equations, the more they realized the complexities of time were beyond anything they had prepared for. One evening, Clara sat alone in the lab, staring at the equations on the board. She knew they were on the verge of something monumental, but the fear was starting to creep in. Was this really the right thing to do? Was there a way to control the chaos they were about to unleash? She took a deep breath and erased the final line of the equation, resetting the variables. Maybe they had missed something. Maybe there was a piece they hadn't seen yet. As she began to rework the numbers, her phone rang again. This time the voice on the other end was clear, direct. "You're not the only one looking into time travel, Clara. There are people who won't let you get away with this." Clara's heart raced. "Who is this?" The voice responded with a chilling finality. "Someone who knows exactly what you're about to do, and will stop you." The line clicked dead. Clara sat with Dr. Harlon, both of them looking at the files they had gathered. The warning calls were escalating, and their research had become more dangerous with each passing day. Clara could feel the weight of the decision hanging over her. "I don't know how much longer we can keep doing this," Harlon said, his voice low. "The more we interfere, the more unstable things become. It's like time is fighting back." Clara clenched her fists. "I can't stop now. There's too much at stake. We have to push forward." Dr. Harlon looked at her, his face a mix of admiration and concern. "I understand, Clara, but we need a plan. This can't just be about proving we can manipulate time. We need to understand the consequences first." Clara nodded. "We'll figure it out as we go, but we're not stopping. We're too close." Clara stared at the computer screen, the numbers before her eyes spinning in a confusing blur. The more she tried to make sense of the calculations, the more the paradoxes seemed to multiply. Every attempt to control time only seemed to push the boundaries further, and the implications were beginning to hit home. "What if we're wrong?" she muttered under her breath, running her fingers through her hair. "What if we've missed something critical?" Dr. Harlon walked into the lab, his face lined with concern. "I was hoping you'd ask that," he said, sitting down next to her. "We've crossed a threshold, Clara. The more we interfere, the more unpredictable the results become." Clara sighed, her fingers tapping nervously on the desk. "I know, but we can't stop now. We're close. We've seen the cracks in time. We need to know what happens if we push further." Dr. Harlon met her gaze, his voice grave. "If we push too far, we risk creating a paradox, something that could unravel time itself." Clara stood up and paced the room. "I don't care about the risks anymore. I need to understand it, Harlon. We can't back down now." The air in the lab was thick with tension as Clara and Dr. Harlon discussed their next steps. The calculations had become increasingly complex, and Clara couldn't shake the feeling that they were nearing something far more dangerous than they had imagined. "We need to experiment," Clara said, her voice determined. "I don't care if it's risky. We need to know how deep this goes." Dr. Harlon looked at her, his face a mixture of fear and concern. "You don't understand the risks, Clara. We're talking about altering reality itself. A single mistake could fracture time beyond repair." Clara didn't flinch. "I'm willing to take that risk. We've been standing at the edge for too long. It's time to step forward." Harlon stood, his voice becoming more forceful. "Clara, you're talking about playing with fire. One wrong move, and we could lose everything. Our reality, our lives, even our memories." Clara turned toward him, her expression hardening. "I've already lost everything, Harlon. The only thing left is the truth, and I'm not letting it slip away." Later that evening, Clara set up the experiment. The lab was dimly lit, with the hum of machines filling the air. She adjusted the settings on the device, her heart pounding in her chest. She had no idea what would happen next, but she couldn't turn back. "This is it," she whispered to herself, her fingers brushing the controls. Dr. Harlon watched from across the room, his expression tense. "Clara, think about this. We don't know what we're doing. Once we activate it, there's no going back." "I know the risks," Clara replied, her voice steady. "But we need to know. We can't keep running from the truth." With a deep breath, Clara pressed the button. The machine powered up with a low pulsing sound, and for a moment, everything went still. Then the room began to warp, time itself bending and twisting before her eyes. Clara felt her breath catch in her throat. She had done it. But what had she done? The world around Clara seemed to flicker, and for a moment she couldn't tell whether the lab had shifted, or if it was her perception that had altered. The time distortion was palpable, an eerie sensation in the air, like everything was both here and not here. Dr. Harlon rushed to her side, his voice frantic. "Clara, what's happening? This isn't supposed to happen." Clara's hands trembled as she adjusted the controls, but the machine's effects were spiraling out of control. The walls of the lab blurred, and the sound of the world around them became muffled, like they were underwater. "We've gone too far," Harlon said, his voice rising in panic. "We've disrupted time itself. Clara, we have to shut it down." Clara shook her head, her eyes wide with fear and realization. "I can't. The paradox. It's already started." She watched helplessly as the distortion grew, the lab dissolving into a vortex. The future, the past, and everything in between seemed to collapse around them. Everything seemed to stop. The machine hummed louder, the lights flickering erratically. Clara could feel the weight of time pressing in on her, the paradox pulling at her consciousness. She could see it now, images flashing before her eyes, brief moments from her past and future, all colliding at once. She stumbled backward, trying to grasp onto something real. "This is impossible," she whispered. "This can't be happening." Dr. Harlan's voice snapped her out of her reverie. "Clara, listen to me. We need to reverse this. We need to reset the machine." But before Clara could respond, the distortion intensified, and a loud crack filled the air. The machine malfunctioned, sending out a shockwave that knocked them both to the ground. Clara's vision blurred as the world around her spun wildly. She tried to push herself up, but everything felt wrong. Time was no longer the same. Clara's head spun as she slowly regained consciousness. The world around her was silent, and when her vision cleared, she realized that something was wrong. The lab was no longer the same. Distortion had shifted everything, and the once familiar surroundings now looked foreign and warped. Dr. Harlan was beside her, his hand on her shoulder, his face pale with worry. "Clara, are you all right?" he asked, his voice trembling. Clara blinked, trying to focus. "What happened? The machine, did it work?" Harlan's eyes widened with disbelief. "No, Clara. It didn't work. It broke everything." Clara stood up shakily, her legs unsteady. The lab seemed to shift as though the very fabric of space-time was being pulled apart. "What do you mean? What's happening?" "The paradox, it's not just affecting the machine. It's affecting everything, Clara. Reality itself is changing," Harlan replied. Clara looked around, panic rising in her chest. "We need to fix it. We need to reverse whatever we've done." The air around them felt thick, as though it were vibrating with energy. Time was no longer a fixed point, it was malleable, bending in ways they couldn't predict. Clara took a hesitant step forward, and the floor beneath her feet seemed to ripple like water. "This isn't just a malfunction," Clara said, her voice shaky. "It's like time is collapsing in on itself." Dr. Harlan looked around, his brow furrowed with concern. "We've triggered something we can't control. Time's loops, its fractures, they're all starting to converge. If we don't do something, we could lose everything we know." Clara turned to face him, her eyes steely with determination. "Then we'll fix it. We have to." Harlan shook his head. "Fixing it isn't enough. We might have already altered something fundamental. Things might never go back to normal. We have to be prepared for what comes next." Clara's jaw tightened. "I'm prepared. We fix this, Harlan, now." As the hours passed, Clara and Dr. Harlan worked tirelessly, attempting to reverse the paradox that had unfolded. But every attempt only seemed to make things worse. The distortion in time wasn't just affecting the machine anymore. It was bleeding into the world outside. Clara watched as the city outside the lab's window flickered. Buildings appeared and disappeared in the blink of an eye, the skyline shifting back and forth between different versions of reality. "What are we seeing?" Clara whispered, her voice filled with awe and fear. Harlan stood beside her, his face grim. "This isn't just a glitch. It's the fabric of reality itself unraveling. We've created an unstable loop, Clara. The past, present, and future are merging into one." Clara's hands trembled as she reached for the control panel again. "There has to be a way to fix this." But just as she reached out, the lab flickered again, and this time, the distortion wasn't limited to the outside world. The floor beneath her feet vanished, replaced by an endless void. Clara stumbled, reaching for the desk to steady herself as the floor continued to fade. "This is it, Harlan. We've crossed the point of no return." Harlan's voice shook as he reached for her. "We have to fix it, Clara. We can't let it go this far." But as he reached out, time around them rippled again. In a split second, everything changed. Clara was no longer standing in the lab. She was back at the beginning, standing in her apartment, staring at the equations on her desk. "What?" Clara whispered, looking around in disbelief. Is this the past?" But it wasn't. It was something in between. The timeline had fractured completely, and now Clara was stuck in the middle of it all. Dr. Harlan appeared beside her, but he too looked disoriented. "This is not right," he muttered. "Time isn't just broken, it's looping." Clara looked down at her hands. We've done this before, Harlon. We've already made this choice. But it wasn't supposed to be like this. Clara and Harlon stood in the apartment, the reality around them folding and reshaping. Each attempt to move forward only took them further back in time, each loop growing tighter, more dangerous. Clara could feel the weight of every decision pressing down on her. "We have to reset the machine," Clara said, her voice resolute. "We can't let this go on any longer." Dr. Harlon nodded, but there was fear in his eyes. "But the paradox. It's not just time anymore. We've tangled with fate. We could be erasing everything." Clara's hands tightened around the machine's controls. "It's the only way. If we don't fix this now, everything will disappear." But as she prepared to act, the lab began to distort once again. This time, the distortion wasn't just in the environment, it was in their minds too. Memories from the past and glimpses of the future began to collide, leaving them both breathless. "We don't have time to think anymore," Clara whispered. "We have to act." Clara stood before the machine, the reality around her still shifting unpredictably. Each time she tried to stabilize it, another ripple would form, distorting her surroundings. Time itself had become their enemy, and the weight of their choices was becoming too much to bear. "We can't keep doing this," Dr. Harlon said, his voice heavy with frustration. "Every time we try to fix it, it makes things worse. It's like time is fighting back." Clara's gaze remained fixed on the machine. "I know, but we don't have a choice. If we don't fix this now, everything will collapse. Time, reality, will unravel completely." Dr. Harlon walked over, standing beside her. "We've already lost so much. What if the changes are irreversible? What if there's no going back?" Clara's fingers brushed the controls, the humming of the machine growing louder. "There's always a way forward, Harlon. We just have to find it." The air was thick with tension as Clara and Dr. Harlon analyzed the data once more. The machine, though still unstable, flickered with life, its strange humming filling the room. It was their only hope now, and Clara wasn't about to give up. "We've tried everything," Harlon said, his voice laced with doubt. "Every equation, every variable. Nothing is working. We've lost control." Clara's hand hovered over the reset button, but she hesitated. "There's something we've missed. There has to be. We're too close, Harlon. I can feel it." Harlon looked at her, his face etched with concern. "Clara, what if you're wrong? What if we're just making things worse?" She met his gaze. "If we don't act, everything we've worked for will be for nothing. We have to fix this before it's too late." With that, Clara pressed the button. The machine roared to life. As soon as Clara pressed the button, the entire lab seemed to shake. The walls vibrated, and the machines around them buzzed erratically. Clara gripped the edge of the desk, trying to steady herself as the room around her began to ripple like water. "This isn't right," Dr. Harlon shouted. "Clara, we need to stop. It's too much. The machine's overloading." Clara's heart raced as she watched the monitors flash with incomprehensible data. "We can't stop now, Harlon. It's too late for that." Suddenly, everything went silent. The room, the machine, and the entire lab froze. Clara's breath caught in her throat. "What happened?" she whispered. Dr. Harlon was looking at the screens with wide eyes. "Clara, we've crossed a line. We've altered something fundamental." Clara turned to face him. "What do you mean? What did we do?" Harlon pointed to the screens. "Look for yourself." Clara approached the screens slowly, her pulse quickening as she saw what Dr. Harlon had pointed to. The data wasn't just strange, it was familiar. It was her own timeline, distorted and splintered into multiple versions of herself. "No," Clara whispered. "This can't be possible. This is me, different versions of me." Harlon looked at the screen, his face pale. "We've created alternate timelines, paradoxes. Each one of those versions is a consequence of the changes we made. We've shattered time." Clara backed away from the screen, her mind racing. "What happens now? What did we do to time?" Dr. Harlon shook his head. "I don't know, but I'm afraid these versions of you might start to collide. And when they do? He trailed off, his voice heavy with dread. It could erase everything. All of us. Clara's voice trembled. We need to stop it. We have to undo this. Clara's mind was racing. She couldn't believe what they had done. The timelines were bleeding into each other, and now, the very fabric of reality was at risk. She had to fix it. There had to be a way to reverse the damage they had caused. Clara, Dr. Harlon said, his voice breaking through her thoughts. We need to go back to the beginning. We need to reset everything before it's too late. Clara nodded, wiping the sweat from her brow. I know. We'll start from scratch. We'll fix it. As she reached for the controls again, she felt a sudden jolt. The distortion was growing, the past, present, and future, all colliding. She was no longer sure where she was, what timeline she was in. But there was no turning back now. If they didn't act quickly, they would lose everything. Clara's hands shook as she adjusted the controls once again, her eyes darting from screen to screen. The distortions in time were no longer confined to the lab. She could feel them in the air around her, like static electricity, every moment stretching and collapsing in on itself. We're running out of time, Harlon, Clara said, her voice tight. We need to find a solution, and fast. Dr. Harlon looked up from the data, his face drawn. I know. The paradoxes are spreading. I've been tracking the fluctuations in the timeline. Every second we wait, the cracks grow wider. If we don't act, we won't just lose this reality. We'll lose all of them. Clara swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest. I didn't want this to happen, but we're the only ones who can fix it. We're going to have to try something we haven't even considered, Harlon replied, his tone grim. We have to synchronize the timelines. We need to merge them back into one. Clara turned to him, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. How do we do that? Dr. Harlon stepped forward, looking at the controls with a mixture of fear and determination. We've been splitting time into multiple branches, Clara. Each branch has created its own version of reality. To synchronize them, we'll need to collapse the timelines back into one singular reality. Clara nodded, her thoughts racing. But collapsing them, won't that destroy the alternate versions of us? Harlon hesitated. Yes, it could. It could erase every single version that's been altered. And the danger is, if we fail, the timelines could collapse entirely. There'll be no way to restore anything. Clara's stomach twisted at the thought. So we're playing with fire. Harlon gave her a sharp look. It's more than fire. It's a gamble with the very fabric of existence. Clara took a deep breath. Then let's gamble. Clara's hand hovered over the central switch. The room was silent, save for the soft hum of the machine. She could feel her pulse in her ears, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. I'm ready, she said, her voice steady. Harlon nodded. Once you pull that switch, there's no going back. You'll be synchronizing all the timelines. It might work, or it might tear everything apart. Clara met his gaze, her eyes hard. I can't live with the alternative. We have to fix this now. She pulled the switch. The machine began to whir, its lights flickering as the timelines started to converge. The lab filled with a high-pitched hum, the air thick with the feeling of reality bending and snapping back into place. For a moment, Clara thought she could feel the timelines fighting against each other, like a tug-of-war in her mind. But then, the machine powered down, and everything went still. Clara held her breath. Did it work? The silence was deafening. Clara and Dr. Harlon waited, their eyes glued to the monitors. The machine had powered down, but the lab remained unchanged, as if the universe itself were holding its breath. Is it over? Harlon asked, his voice tentative. Clara scanned the data. For a moment, it seemed like nothing had changed. But then the numbers on the screen shifted. The data began to stabilize slowly at first, then more rapidly. It's working, Clara said, a note of disbelief in her voice. The timelines, they're converging. We've done it. But just as she spoke, the machine let out a sudden shrill noise, and the entire room shook. What was that? Harlon shouted over the noise. Clara grabbed the controls, her eyes wide with panic. It's not over. The timelines. They're still unstable. The machine began to spark, its screens flashing erratically. The walls of the lab started to ripple once again. The lab's walls rippled, and time seemed to stretch again, distorting everything around them. Clara tried to steady herself, gripping the desk as the room spun. She couldn't believe it. Despite their best efforts, they hadn't fixed the paradox. "What's happening?" Dr. Harlon shouted. "This shouldn't be possible. We synchronized everything." Clara's hands flew over the controls, trying desperately to stop the destabilization. "We didn't synchronize everything. There's another variable, Harlon. We missed something crucial." The lab shook violently, and suddenly, Clara felt the ground beneath her feet disappear. She was falling through time again. The timelines, despite their attempts to mend them, had fractured into chaos once more. "Clara!" Harlan's voice echoed through the distortion, but it was too late. Clara felt herself being pulled into a vortex of conflicting realities, unable to grasp onto anything. And then, darkness. Clara awoke in the lab. The world around her twisted. The walls were changing, flickering between eras. Dr. Harlan's voice echoed from a distance, distorted. "Clara, can you hear me?" Clara looked around, disoriented. "Where are we? This isn't right," Harlan replied. "Time is collapsing. We've lost control." Clara's gaze hardened. "Then we fix it. We go back to the beginning." Harlan looked at the chaotic data. "We can't trust time anymore. We need to reset everything. But we don't know where to start." Clara's voice was firm. "We start at the moment we first activated the machine. We reverse it all." Harlan hesitated. "It's risky, Clara. We could erase everything." Clara's eyes were steely. "We can't stop now." The machine powered up again, its hum filling the lab. Clara pushed the button, and the distortion intensified. "Clara, are you sure?" Harlan shouted over the noise. "There's no choice," Clara replied, gripping the controls. For a moment, everything froze. Clara held her breath. Did it work? The lab flickered back to life, but everything was still wrong. "This is the beginning," Harlan said. "Before everything went wrong." Clara nodded. "This is our chance. We reset everything now." But as they worked, the lab shook again, and Clara realized, time's still unstable. The paradoxes haven't been fixed. Clara and Harlan worked together, frantically adjusting the machine. "If this doesn't work, we're lost in time," Harlan said, voice shaky. Clara's gaze never wavered. "Then we fix it." With a final push, Clara pressed the reset button. The machine hummed. Time rippled, then settled. Silence. "We did it," Clara whispered, as the world around them finally stabilized.